Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. I've gone live about 40 seconds early because we're having an interesting conversation, and it never works then when we go live. It's never as interesting again. We were just talking about the new EB. And, well, Ian was saying no one's interested. Oh, Louis can come on. We started just a moment or two early, Louis. Good evening to you. We were just going to talk about the EB. The EB, even for Geo. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Geo. Yeah. And I said, meh. And Ian said, well, what did you say, Ian?
Well, I just don't think anyone's interested in fixed wing for the most part for commercial operation. And it's, the bit I liked from the documentation they put out, that it's a budget model at $10,000. Okay, I think we've all agreed for some time that UAS are a bit too cheap. However, when you're calling something a budget model and $10,000 for the basic, and that doesn't even include RTK, I think it's it's a weird one because it's basically a Phantom 4 Pro spec. Camera wise, it's basically a Phantom 4 Pro, and I just don't see how many people are going to want to spend $10,000 on a piece of foam because that is, for all intents and purposes, what it is. Now, Louis going to rip me apart now.
I really think that the confinement in Wales is getting back to you. Come on.
And think about it. Some people have spent more on a piece of foam with the older EBs.
Yeah.
But the thing is, come on, guys. It's not you just trying to get to the base cost. It's not the cost of the tool that determines the validity of the system. It's what you can do with it.
Okay.
And that's the most important. If they ensure you that you can have a trouble-free platform that can do whatever they claim that it can, perfect. It costs $10,000, very cheap. Yeah. It costs $20,000, might be cheap still. So it's not a problem of the base price. Base price, we are only interested when we are doing it for our own pleasure. Come on, Ian. We are the guys that are striving to buy flight controllers.
You can't buy anything anymore, Louis. You can't buy technology no more. Technology's out of stock.
Sorry. Some of us buy it. Others test it.
I get by a lot of it, thank you, more than I'd like. But I get your point, Louis. I do get your point. Look, it can do 160 hectares, which is what they're saying. What I'm looking at this from is small commercial operator point of view. It doesn't make any sense. From maybe a large, especially in the US, because I can get 6 Phantom 4 Pros for that money.
Yeah. And can you get the same professional quality result?
It's the same camera.
That's not my question. I really couldn't care the tool. I really couldn't care less about the tool. I really care about the entire pipeline and the final results. You don't sell the camera to the customer. You sell the product of the camera.
You sell the output, is what we're saying. At the end of the day, it's data. It's data acquisition. At the end of the day, it's that. I just looking at it, it makes sense from all of the EBs made sense to me when we were talking about big mapping. I've always got that. What I don't quite get is with this falls in because they're using the words budget, and
it is budget considering the other. Come on, what else are you going to do? You buy a believer from China, you stick a few motors to it, you spend 1 or 2 weeks trying to make it ready to fly, and then you go and you do a survey. Come on, Ian.
You can still do a lot with 6 drones, Louis.
I want it now.
A lot with 6 quads.
So the great thing about the EB, right? And I think I've got around 200 hours on one. The great thing about the EB is its software, its usability. I love that on the EB. I do not like its self-destroying way it lands, but that's just the way it is. You know, you have to accept that when you say, I want you to land here, it will land within a certain radius, be it in the bottom of a ditch because it overshoots because of the wind, or it hits the hedge, or it goes in a tree. I've had all these things with an EB. They don't land exactly where you think. You've got to be a bit careful. However, the simplicity of the software, I think, is brilliant. I love eMotion. I think it's absolutely brilliant to use. I love the way the EB does exactly what it says on the tin. You just take it out, put the battery in, do the check, you shake it 3 times, into wind, you chuck it, it goes, does the job, is brilliant. But 10K, this is the problem. To unlock it to fly more distance or time, I think is bad. Versus, let's say I did buy the Believer, and I have 2 of them here. To put a Believer together with the same specs, same camera, roughly, is about $3,000 or just under. Okay, and my time to build it. I'm stuck with Mission Planner, right? Which is the niggle. I have to have 6S batteries, which can be a bit more awkward. But you can go 4S, but you know, typically 6S. But the endurance on the Believer is way more. But it's not as easy to use. You've got a bit more niggle with a Believer than you have the EB. But the EB, there's pros and cons to both.
And the thing is, you build the Believer and you fly the Believer. Can you hire someone to your company and let's say you have a job that requires, on your calculations, requires 4 planes flying simultaneously? You need to hire 4 guys. How long will you take to train them? Make it.
But the Believer will do the flight of 4 EBs in one flight.
Yeah. The endurance on the Believer smashes the EB into oblivion. It literally does.
I'm sure that the insurance of a Cessna 172 will smash the endurance of the Believer, and with better results.
Yes, you are definitely jumping into that territory where it's almost easier to put some sort of sensor pod on a microlight and send it off. You are beginning to span that grey area, shall we say. So if you're going down that way, though, you might as well buy 5 Phantoms for the cost. And then if you do the big 165 hectare job, it's a bit of a pain, but you can do it with your 5 Phantoms. Yeah. And when they're not working, they're off doing 5 different jobs.
By the way, Gary, don't forget you need a 40-foot container of batteries and 2 containers of battery chargers and lots of extension cords. Come on.
True.
Come on. You have to think on all these little details, and people usually forget about battery management, and not battery management the way we charge them with our hobbyist chargers. No, real battery management that you have to have everything in place. And come on. Oh my God. Now he's going to sit on top of the Believer and says that he can do manned flight on the Believer.
I know. But we're definitely spanning or being more easily able to jump into the where the manned aviation world works. You know, getting pretty close. Then it's just the size of the sensor. Good evening to you, Richard, drone lawyer. Shouldn't you say drone barrister there to you?
I can say that. Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Now that you're here, we can stop talking about you.
Thank you very much.
But the reason I asked you to come on today, and we'll jump to this, and we'll come back to that airframe. But maybe it'll come into this part of the conversation. The drone bill in the UK, I can't remember exactly what it was called. I believe it's just passed. So what does that mean? Freedoms for all. We can do whatever we like now. Is that what's just been brought into law?
No, not quite. Air Traffic Management and Unmanned Aircraft Bill is its full title. So it's in 3 parts, literally, as it is now. It literally today dropped into the House of Commons. So the House of Lords are finished with it for now. The debate. I think it was its second reading. Yeah, the second reading in the House of Commons was actually today. And what was really interesting, and I managed to dip into some of the discussion, nearly every MP mentioned Gatwick. Nearly everyone mentioned Gatwick. And they correlated the powers, the police powers under this bill as a direct response to Gatwick and how necessary it is. So really quite frustrating.
Something else.
So the bill's in three parts. Part one is all about airspace change proposals. So this is how we can change the airspace, and actually where the airspace is not being efficiently used by the aviation authority, it can be changed. So there's some stuff in there about that. Part two is more about licensing air traffic services and more around the airport slot movement. So the 80-20 rule for aircraft. So if they don't fly 80% of the time in those slots, they lose them. So they're changing that because of COVID and the decimation it's had on the industry. And then part three is all about what we're really interested in, and that's unmanned aircraft. I would say part one may also be what we're really interested in the future because of UTM and how that might adapt airspace change proposals as well. So what happened was it went through the House of Lords, went through its report stage and third reading, and I had quite a lot of interaction with the House of Lords. And in fact, I'm now quoted in Hansard.
Hey,
yeah, I know. Every lawyer's dream. I'm not so sure.
I've been in there as well. It's not it's so easy.
Tell a penny. What the hell?
yeah. Who hasn't?
So anyway, so I did quite a lot of work with the House of Lords, and we nearly got the amendment that I was asking for, which was to carve out the piece around commercial operators and making sure we're excluded. But unfortunately, there was I think it was a technicality with one of the members of the House of Lords in terms of not reserving their position because of the hybrid working environment that we're in right now. So the third reading went in, it basically got passed, and once the third reading's done with no amendment, it then drops down to the House of Commons, which is where we are now. And this is my plea to everybody out there. If you're not happy about the drone bill, now is the time to write to your MP if you want to change it. It's got the second reading now, is done today. And this is all about, I made some notes. One of them even commented, Richard Fuller MP for Bedfordshire with Luton in his jurisdiction, talked about police time and the resources of police. And yet he then ended saying, I fully support the bill. And they were really, really happy with what the Minister for Aviation said, who's Mr. Courts, who said, don't worry, the police, we're working with the MPCC, they're going to have all the resources they need to be able to deal with these kind of issues. And we're working closely with them and everything else. And then you had Christine Jardine for Edinburgh West, who said, we haven't had an airspace change that we've been crying out for since the 1950s, yet we support the bill. And by the way, she said, there have been reports of 50 near misses, and geofencing software is going to make it impossible for collisions. And this is the level of detail that we're dealing with that MPs are now talking about with really little idea and insight into the true focus. And one of them quoted the near miss in December within, I think it was an EasyJet flight at 7,000 or 8,000 feet, and that it was a 10 kilo drone, and quoted that.
Zero evidence.
Recorded. Yeah, I mean, how can a pilot say at 7,000 or 8,000 feet, doing whatever speed they're doing, look out of the window and say that was a 10 kilo drone? Absolutely certain about this, and that's a near miss. Might have been a near miss, but the detail and the facts that relate to that are quite interesting. So this is what we're dealing with now. So for every commercial operator out there, your MP has got a chance. It's going to go to committee stage and then has another reading in the House of Commons. And if there are amendments, the House of Lords, when it goes back up, will debate those amendments They might change them, they might not, depending on what they are within their debate. And then it's law, and then we're done. That's what we've got to deal with. So, I commend everybody. If you're not happy about the onerous police powers and you're a commercial operator, write to your MP and say, for example, I'll give you a case example, and this is what I raised with the House of Lords. In fact, I've talked to Mark about this too. You've set out your takeoff landing zone. You've got a 30-meter landing zone, and the police officer comes in because somebody, and this is what the other MPs said, we've got great concerns about privacy around drones and societal acceptance. The police officer's told by a passerby, oh, that drone was spying on somebody's house. Oh, that's a privacy issue. The police officer, he only has to reasonably believe that something's happening before he then requests you to ground your drone. Hang on a minute. I'm a commercial operator. Don't disturb me. I'm flying. No, you're not obeying my lawful instruction. I'm telling you to ground your drone. Well, are you accepting liability now? You taking control of my drone while it's in the air? Article 241, and we all know that, about being reckless or negligent in the air, causing injury to somebody else. Police officer walks into your 30-meter landing and takeoff zone. You lose GPS. It's in ATI mode. Get a slight wind gust that hits him in the face. Who's liable? Or I now go to my alternate landing zone because that's in my risk assessment, being a conscious pilot that I am, because my existing landing zone is being compromised. I now go to my secondary one, and now the police officer reasonably believes that I'm evading him and his instruction. So I eventually land my drone, and now he confiscates my equipment, and I've got a drone job tomorrow. What do I do? And this is what we're dealing with, and that's not even addressing the issues that will happen in the future where we're flying at scale. Say, for example, I've got a business that's now running 200 flights transporting NHS stuff, and PC Blogs thinks, oh, no, something's wrong here. I'm now telling you to ground your drone. Well, which drone is it? I've got 200 in the air on commercial operations. Are you telling me to ground all? Yes, I'm telling you to ground all. But they're flying over the sea. They're flying over urban areas. They're flying over wherever. The drone bill does not contemplate. And one MP hung their hat on the fact that as technology changes and advances, we hope that the minister will realise this and change the law quickly enough. That
was going to be exactly my question to it. Well, you were just about to answer, so I'm sorry I've butted in, but when they want to change something big in this, how long will it take them? Because this is plainly not how we're going to be flying in 10 years' time.
Yeah, so this bill actually started off life, I think it was over 2-3 years ago. Because of the election and because of COVID, it kept getting pushed back and pushed back. So this bill's been around for some time now. What was really interesting about this? So the law generally reflects changes in society. So if you look through your statute books and you pick a law out, it will tell you. If you look at the last, say, 80 years of the Civil Aviation Act, for example, you look at that, and you can see how public opinion has persuaded MPs to change law because that's what was relevant at the time. Looking at the passage of law is a good marker in the sand of what was relevant at that time that needed a change in law, right? But it doesn't always happen quickly enough. And technological advances back then did not happen as quick as they do now. And we're seeing technology change so quickly, it's impossible for the law to keep up to date with this. So you can see now we're trying to shoehorn old powers around the counter unmanned strategy, for example. You take the Telecommunications, the Wireless Telegraphy Act. Okay, we're trying to shoehorn the powers in that in and around the counter unmanned strategy to interdict drones, right? It's an old law. This itself, when we're flying BV loss at scale, imagine this in 4 or 5 years' time. It's going to be so massively out of date because the police will have superior powers to control business and commercial opportunities. It's going to be unbelievable.
So who do I? So when this copper and I land a bit away, I go to my secondary site, right? So
Yeah.
told me to land. I can't land because he compromised it. I go and land in my secondary. He then believes everything. He takes my drone and confiscates it. Can I bill them for taking my drone? Can I cross-charge him because he's taken my kit away illegally in my eyes?
Yeah.
Therefore, he's stopping me from fulfilling my contract. Therefore, I want to hold the police force liable for removing my aircraft.
So
Can I cross-charge them? Is there anything in law that says, actually, he was doing the right thing? Can I sue, for example, them for taking away my kit? What I would consider illegally as well.
yeah, if it was me, because obviously, as I've said before, I can't give you legal advice because I'm not professionally instructed by you. But this is me. If as a commercial operator, right?
My phone. You're in my phone.
Right. There will be, I'm sure, routes to a claim, and there are. You know, we've seen the police having to pay out for wrongful arrest and that kind of stuff, right? And we've seen that with the unfortunate couple that got arrested over the Gatwick drone incident. Dare I mention Gatwick again? Okay, so there will be, as far as I'm concerned, I would certainly be pursuing a claim for loss of profit and damage and loss to my business as a commercial operator. I would certainly be pursuing the police for that. The issue is, of course, is that there's a low threshold for the police to act, isn't there? Because they only have to reasonably believe something has happened. And what we've got to try and do is get around this. What was really interesting was during the debates in the House of Lords, one member of the House of Lords actually proposed a compensatory amendment with respect to an airspace change having an adverse effect on somebody else. Okay, now you can imagine that in a UTM system.
But then surely that airspace change might affect the value of my property. Let's forget aircraft altogether, because now suddenly all the aircraft are routing over my house. Would I be up for a little bit of a claim for that then, if that were to be a thing?
That I don't know, Gary. But what was really interesting, just on a slightly different tangent, was that one member of the House of Lords proposed a change to ban all flights below 7,000 feet, especially over areas of scientific interest or natural beauty. And interestingly, in the House of Commons today, the aviation minister said that will never happen because there are so many airfields that are so close to such sites. It'd be impossible for them to be able to regulate that because of takeoff and landing below 7,000 feet. So there was no way, the aviation minister said this, there's no way of banning flights over areas of scientific interest or natural beauty. So that really is direct conflict to organizations like National Trust who want to make that one step further with respect to that. So we're really seeing some interesting dynamic changes and views on the way that this air traffic management and unmanned aircraft bill is going to interact in the future, I think. And it's just getting to the nub of it. I haven't really seen in anywhere any legal commentary on this. I think I'm the only person in the legal world that's actually talking about this to the drone community, at an extent. And as you know, over a year or so ago, I drafted my first draft letter for people to write to the MP, which I'm grateful for you publishing on SUS News. And I think that might the format of that letter is still incredibly relevant. Not all of it may be because of the way that the bill's been amended in the House of Lords and being passed down. But the other thing that's really interesting here, sorry to just interrupt you, in October this year, I think it's October this year. I'm just checking my notes. So there's a government initiative which means that regulation has to be regularly reviewed to make sure it's fit for purpose. And I think the Civil Aviation Act is up this October for their 5-year review. So that could be another opportunity to press hard on the DFT to make a change in the law because they're compelled to do that. And there, I suspect, we'll start seeing certain people putting in Freedom of Information Act requests as to what work they've done in advance of that change. Hint, hint to everybody out there in the drone community. But and so yeah, kind of roundabout answer to your question. Keeping up to date with the law is incredibly difficult, especially in an environment that changes as much as the environment that we operate in, because of the technological advances.
So, just from the way you work, sort of, or barristers work, sort of way. So that information about restricting flights below 7,000 feet, that could be that is something to watch, isn't it? And as you say, with the National Trust and things like that. So, if you put that in a folder marked, let's watch this, or you just squirreled it away in your mind, I'm just asking you how do you deal with things when you see things going through Parliament like this? Do you go, oh, that's interesting, I'll note that, I'll note this, I'll note the other?
Yeah. So what's interesting about what's debated in Parliament is usually when there's a test case that goes into a court, there's no previous case law, which is the basis of our common law jurisdiction. We have case law that informs and further define what's being put in the statute books, right? So that judges can apply the law in a way that it is right and proper. But if there's no case law, and the judges want to have an idea of what the intent was behind the legislation, they will go to Hansard, which is the Parliament's publication. And it'd be somebody like me to direct the judge and say, look, Judge, in Hansard, the politicians at the time they were debating this law said X, Y, and Z, and this was clearly the intent of what they meant. And that's the starting point until we start getting more case law. And then you start referring to the case law, or you go to other jurisdictions. Yes,
because Philip's in the comments and last week we were speaking a lot about AirMap, and of course that was exactly their model, was no fly zone and pay to have your house removed from or a no fly zone, and that would blow that model out of the water if somebody said no, we're not going to restricts flights below 7,000 feet in the general everywhereness, because we could never enforce it. It would blow them out of the water.
What was a red flag to me today with if you look at aviation and the 80-20 rule, right? The fact that you've got to fly 80% of the time to guarantee your slots, 20% you don't have to. What they want to do is they're going to free that up in this bill. And the aviation minister said, it's absolutely right that aircraft should pay to play. Yeah. And I thought, interesting. Where are we going to go with that in the future? If you set the precedent in mind, where do you think it's going to end up?
And what I find interesting on that would be, so we all know that if you fly to Heathrow, you pay a landing fee, don't you? And a takeoff fee or whatever, right?
Yeah.
If you keep it to the weight scale, right, and which is what you should do. So manned aviation, they pay in weight down to your Cessna or whatever. Then there's microlights. Can you imagine how much it would cost for a drone? It'd be like 2p.
But then you have navigation. You have navigation charges as well for when you're using air traffic services. So that's a direct correlation for UTM, because you're using the UTM service to keep yourself safe. So then I go, well, that probably costs about the same as your air navigation services then.
So I've put a freedom of information request into the DFT for any MP or Lord that has been lobbying for a UTM of any kind. I've literally requested if the DFT's been approached. Let's find out if any ministers have been lobbying for such systems.
I wouldn't just confine it to ministers. I would actually ask them what companies.
Oh, I have done. But I did that last week. Today I added on. I want to know about MPs and Lords.
Yeah, I know. Ian contacted me about helping him with some of his FOI because he's hit a stumbling. So if you're out there, Ian, more than happy to have the chat. Sorry, I didn't get back to you on Twitter. I'm not super on Twitter. I'm trying to get better. Interestingly, today, as these members of Parliament were talking, I located their Twitter names and I started asking them questions. For example, every time one of them mentioned Gatwick, I said I'd be grateful if you could point me to the evidence that you've seen in relation to Gatwick, and of course I've had no response yet.
I'll tell you what we should do, Richard. I should get together with you. We'll do a video. We'll do like the drone bill video and why Gatwick didn't exist. And then what we'll do is put it as a video, YouTube, and we'll send it to every MP that's got a Twitter account.
I think I'm not quite sure how we digitally hold their feet to the fire. A lot of these people, but it is, and I'm getting quite frustrated. I'll let the other boys join in a second. I'm just getting quite frustrated by our narrow thinking in this industry, or what we are allowing the regulators to continue thinking, as it were. In 10 years' time, nothing that we're doing now will look like it looks now. Probably in 5 years' time, it won't look anything like we're doing it now. And we're going to be so confined by stuff that can't be undone. Was there any big drone delivery companies making any big noise on this, or at them, or trying to have their voice heard?
I don't know. I mean, various MPs were talking about relevant stuff that was going on in their constituency, and there's a DUP MP who was talking about the recent news in Belfast, for example, and how that benefits, and one of them even said, I'm grateful for the MP from Belfast talking about search and rescue, something we'd never contemplated before. And I just thought, oh my God, really? We've been talking about search and rescue for years, and what's really incredible about this is I don't believe any of them have read what was debated in the House of Lords before it dropped down to where they are. To get that level of insight that the House of Lords went into, to understand it a lot more, and what's funny, when you listen to the debate, they always refer to the other place, which is, if I'm in the House of Commons, the other place is the House of Lords. If you're in the House of Lords, the other place is the House of Commons. The other places need to speak. You know, and what's clear from some of the comments from MPs today, they've not read it at all. And in fact, what I did do today as well, I emailed my MP about this some time ago, and he said he was going to write to the minister and get an answer. And today I wrote to him with that email trail, and I said, I trust you're taking part in the debate today, because here's my letter, and we've talked about this. Well, I haven't talked about it. I've written to you about this, and no answer. And I think to your point, Gary, we do need to get to the point where digitally, how can we get these people alert to the fact that
they're being watched? They're being watched. Yeah, we need to feel their collar digitally, so they realise there are some constituents out there that are interested in doing some work for them.
Absolutely. And if we've got to take a lesson from life, the people that got arrested over Gatwick will just happen more and more, I feel, in the future. It will be a case of, I reasonably believe that you're doing something wrong, so I'm arresting you.
Have there been any other things? Where an example, I don't know. Rick, Philip would be talking about cars being lowered, although I see now that even here now the police are going after youngsters that have lowered their car. Philip, if you're still listening, but has there been anything that they've quickly had to get rid of a law that they've made? I don't know, hair coursing or something. I don't know, something that then became impossible to police, so they had to get rid of that law or regulation.
I don't know. I mean, it's once it's enshrined, Gary, and it's the question of whether the police decide to use it or not. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I suppose so. Yes. Well, choose not.
Well, here's a prime example of the police not having the time to deal with things now, let alone the drone stuff. If you have an e-scooter, okay, and you've had one for the past 3 or 4 years in the UK, they've been illegal on our roads, correct? The little electric scooters, Richard?
Yeah, they're illegal. That's right.
Yeah. So I was in London and I tried to drive down by the Thames, and there were loads of them. And I mean loads of them. If the police did have the time, they could literally just stop at every one of those at a crossroads near a junction on a main road, and they would just be filling out forms forever. They don't bother because they haven't got the time. Okay. And saying that the police are going to have time to go around looking at every drone flying. The reason we're going to get remote ID is for security and making sure you're not breaking the law. You know, I put a Freedom of Information Act into the DFT about it, -CA, and you know what? They just come back with that. They didn't answer the question. They just come back with that. And it's quite clear that remote ID in the UK will be used for enforcement. It's that clear. They're looking for the easy way.
Yeah, it will. You're absolutely right. It's going to be ANPR for cars all day long. That's exactly what it's going to be. It's an automated process. It's ka-ching. It's low people input, and you know it's driving cash into the business. The fact that they've already got registration wrapped up at £9 a year and 150,000 people registrants. You know, it's already that cash cow started, and we all know that, especially in this climate where the CAA's income's coming from. Yes, it is also, in fairness, coming from the DFT, and the DFT have given them extra money because of hard times. But when compared to manned aviation, who exactly?
We'll be quickly getting to the crossover point. I bet we're making more money from them than the PPL community to start with already. I bet that registration fees and Ian, people are noticing in the comments that you're shilling drinks as well as chairs now. It's not gone unnoticed that.
Anything to bring in the income, Gary. And today's video is sponsored by
oh no, it's the two brands now. Oh no.
And the segue to this week's sponsor.
Yeah,
please,
what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, I don't know, but Ian and Mark could sell you a product to fill that gap. That's for sure. In the comments, Dan said no need for big drone delivery companies concerned for rules. They have the lobbyists, law firms, and politicians. What if this gets rubber stamped through as it is? Then you can lobby away. It's going to be harder to change. So I would have thought. I'm just guessing that. So I'm surprised that they're not at the table making sure how PC Plod is going to not stop their flights all the time, because there will be nuisance complaints. If it rolls out how people want to people's gardens, there'll be nuisance complaints all day long.
I mean, one of the points that I raised to members of the House of Lords was that, so the police don't have all the resources at the moment, and I think I've spoken about this before on Hangout, and they're going to be educated and clearly they're going to get all the guidance they need, but we're talking about a 7-day wonder here, old style. I can go to a police station not far from me, a little village in Scotland. Are you honestly telling me that the staff in there will understand the documentation that I'm presented, that I've been asked to present? I don't think they will. And what they'll end up doing is saying, oh, you know what? I'm going to phone up Scotland's UAS unit. Let's get those guys down. Sorry, can you come down? I've got a 7-day wonder here. It's on 7 days. He's got 2 hours left. I need you to come down now, please, and verify this paperwork. Oh, but I'm sorry, we're conducting a search and rescue operation at the moment. That's not important. Oh, so what happens?
Well, what happens? All right, Australia's mean 7-day wonder for those international people. In the UK, if the police pull you over for a driving offence, they'll ask you to bring your documents along, your license and your insurance, maybe something else now. Long time since I've driven in England. So what happens? So I get caught, I get pulled over because I'm driving my Ferrari far too fast as normal, and I've got to produce my documents, but through no fault of my own, on that last hour of the last day, when I choose to go in, they can't accept it at the police station for whatever reason. What would happen then, or would that never be a thing?
Well, they know your documents, don't they? They all know the police documents because they, your car
They're
registration.
used to those. Yeah.
They're used to it. They've known it for many, many
Yeah.
years. They don't know what an operational authorization looks like. They don't know what a risk assessment looks like. Yeah, they'll know what a register ID is, or flyer ID, and your operator ID potentially, and they will have links, I'm sure, at some point into that database that provides them with that information. And of course, you've got Mark's fabulous card there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the EU one. But it just, I don't know. I've got to be careful of the high horse I get onto, because the airspace part of this is also interesting, because why on earth do we have so much controlled airspace for the airliners now when they're all bob on digital and accurate? They don't need as much protected airspace now, and that would relieve people with help their house prices left, right, and centre. And if you went down that road, people would be all for changing the way airspace works. It just seems like we are still considering a sky of 20 years ago.
Well, just look at what Farnborough got. Farnborough was sold off, wasn't it?
To an American company.
And look at the airspace grab for controlled airspace they got. You know, there were glider clubs kicking off locally. Their airspace, their grab was massive.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about on airspace around airports, actually, the interesting thing in the bill around airspace change proposals is that CAA will, for the first time, have the power to reduce the airspace around airports. That will come out potentially. Whether they use that power or not, I don't know. But this bill will certainly give them that power to do that.
Do you think CAPS 722, is it E, the one on airspace, where they say we have to have access? You know, you have to make access available to drone users. That was a good thing that came out, though, wasn't it? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see it in one of the CAP volumes. Forgive me, I've read so many of them now. I couldn't tell you exactly which one it was, but yeah, no, I do recall seeing something along those lines. That's absolutely right. But you know, we have to look back to the fundamental principle from ICAO. Airspace has got to be equitable for all users, and that is fundamental. That's international aviation law. That is it. So when you start bringing in charging or airspace change proposals, you know, as a body, we should be saying, well, hang on a minute, how is this providing us equitable access that's fair to all users? How is that happening here?
ARPAS should be all over this, shouldn't they? I did see one of their people talking on a webinar, and he quite frankly worried me, considering he's supposed to be representing the industry. It was very much, well, manned flight's always going to be safer than autonomous flight because there's a man with skin in the game and this and that and the other. And I was saying, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be on our side, mate.
The problem with RPAS, right? And don't get me wrong, I do think they do some good stuff, and they have got lots of people in different departments, allegedly, you know, at the CAA or DFT advising. The problem is they are, to a degree, rolled by the big boys. So, you know, when a company joins RPAS, they pay a lot more money than someone like me. It looks more to me like it's the big boys that they want to look after versus the little boys. And that's from me looking in as a commercial operator. I don't believe RPAS, you know, but they don't shout about what they do very much, which I also think is wrong. So they should tell us, or they should be shouting more when they do something good. You know what I mean? But if you're an operator and you look at RPAS and you go, well, why would I pay £180 a year to join RPAS? What good would it do me? Well, right now I'll be going, if you're not doing something about the drone law that's in Parliament at the minute, if you're not against that, if you're for UTMs, if you think manned aviation is safer than an automated drone flight, you're the wrong person. You know, that person is in the wrong place. But the organizer, it's very hard to tell. I don't want to be too critical because I don't know everything they do. But you know, if you go and look at their membership, you'll see they like members. I believe they've got like Boeing or like a member or something, you know, and they're corporate level and they're pushed their agenda. Who's they going to listen to? Are they going to listen to the corporate? Or are they going to listen to the little guy?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, what's the charter of the organisation? If the charter of the organisation is to reflect all members, then that's what should be happening, right? I don't know what the charter is for RPAS. I haven't read it, but I would imagine it's got to be something along those lines where they've got to reflect all users.
Yeah.
And the interest of all users.
Yes, but they've only got 250 members out of 6,000 PFCO or commercial operational authorizations, which is quite interesting. If you've only got 250 and say 30 or 40 of them are big companies like, I don't know, Amazon, for example, and Boeing or whoever, right? If you've got the big boys there, what are the rest of us, or all the tiny ones? Why haven't they picked up more members is always the curiosity. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am sure RPAS do a lot of good. You know, and I have spoken to Graham at RPAS, and I am convinced they are doing some good. But
I'm sure, but it's just some of the things I saw. But this also speaks of American viewers at AUVSI. Our silly old SUS News' mailing list is larger than the AUVSI's mailing list, yet we don't claim to be in charge of the world. They make huge claims based on a tiny membership. It's quite extraordinary. But Mark rather nailed it. Some of those members are Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Airbus.
We have seen, you know, in the UTM space as well, when the FAA took on and nominated all the companies that had a seat at the table, and they were all big companies. But they did say, you know, the mantra is that they've got to represent the interests and not blockade access to smaller companies now or in the future. And you just think, well, how's that going to happen? Because they're at the table, they're designing the framework by which they're going to exist in the future. So set those parameters.
It'll be, okay, it's going to be, so they're going to go, well, actually, we're not going to blockade the airspace to you, but the requirement is you have to fit this little widget on your drone for our UTM to see you. We're not stopping you. You can do it, but you just got to put this on your drone.
Well, I think we're going to go down the ridge conversation if we're not careful.
Will the same apply to police drones?
You see, that's going to be interesting. Remote ID, right? So I put another freedom of information request in.
This has been catching on, isn't it?
Well, I said I've put in a request. I want all the minutes from the remote ID group meeting and any emails. Okay, because what I'm interested in is when my drone is flying and it's transmitting this remote ID, what protection will be in place to stop that information being sucked up by a hotspot and then shoved up to the internet? And how will it protect my client, right? My client is somewhere in this group somewhere. I have a client. What's going to protect my flight and how I capture the data for them, my unique selling point or my ISP? You know, how is that going to be protected in flight all the time? How are they going to stop people seeing what I'm doing, working out who my clients are, and stealing that information on how my flights are conducted? And I've gone, tell me, has any thought gone into this at all?
Interestingly, I've got something of interest actually that I should speak to you about. So EASA have done some work in this space, and so all of the member states have to have registration in place by the end of this year. So some of them still haven't gone through that hoop, I think, but it's got to be mandated by the end of this year. And once they've got the information in place, each member state, you can facilitate operations by showing that member state your operational authorization from another member state. But in the future, what they're going to do, in fact, no, in the short term, what they're going to do is set up an information exchange through a temporary third-party company until EASA have set up their own one to enable and facilitate the exchange of information around the member states. So there's going to be all sorts of questions that fall out of that tree, I'm sure. And interestingly, so we've got the predefined risk assessments, and we've got 2 currently in the UK, haven't we? And we've got 4, and the 5th was amended in EASA recently. That was published. Okay. So I wrote to EASA and I said, well, I poured through some of the answers to one of their meetings, and it said that they're going to publish some more PDRSAs in the future. So I wrote to EASA and I said, when are you publishing these ones that you've referenced in this document? And they said, well, we intend to publish this March, but they sent me through the new 2 PDRSAs they're going to release.
Hooray!
Yeah. And they are BV loss focused.
Okay.
I mean, I
have to share those with you, Gary. Remind me.
I did write to the CA and says, why is it PDRO2 doesn't cover fixed wing? And they were very much like, it does. I was like,
yeah.
Oh, you haven't got... Pardon?
Predefined risk assessments, yeah, PDRAs. That's right.
Yeah, it doesn't cover fixed wing. And now they were like, it does. And I was like, no, it doesn't. You can't fly a drone that big, that heavy, fixed wing at that speed.
Well, I think one of these new ones might do that, because if I recall, it talked about something along pylons or something like that. So it was quite segregated in terms of where you could do the BV loss flight. So something like that, and but the question now, of course, is we're out of EASA. Sorry, we're out of EU. So what's the CAA going to do about all these predefined risk assessments that EASA are going to be churning out?
And was it the which rule? We reverted back to the old way, didn't we, last week? Was it weather minima or distances or something? We started the change, didn't we? I know we changed something. I can't remember what it was.
Was it AGL?
I don't know, but something. The CAA reverted something back to how it used to be pre EASA, and that is right. Whoa, is that the thin edge? Sorry?
Is it unmanned aircraft?
No, it was all aviation. It was general aviation. It was all aviation. But it was rewinding the clock. So one might think that was the thin end of the wedge. And what else are they going to undo and unravel if you're in the UK? Which will make it rather inconvenient, won't it? To not be following along with your nearest neighbours. But anyway, that's another conversation. You won't be able to fly easily with Louis, which would be a terrible thing. So what else? Where are we doing on time? 52 minutes. What other things have we thought? I'm sure we'll drift back into this conversation. What else has happened this week that's caught everyone's eye? Going once.
Well, there's not much going around.
Bruce is not here.
Everybody is locked down. So I was just looking at, while Richard was talking about the airspace and everything, I was looking at Flight Radar 24 over London. Come on, I can count the planes with my one hand. So
yes. So why do they need all that protected airspace 24 hours a day? You could wind that back at night and let the deliveries be unleashed more easily, and all sorts of things you could do with flexible airspace that moved around the time of day.
Yeah.
Well, what was interesting is, so in the UK we have the flight restriction zones around airports with the runway protection zones, little round things with the stubs. It used to be in 2016, the original law was if the airport is shut, you could then go within 1 kilometre of its boundary, no matter what shape it was. And they had, all of a sudden they went, actually, we're going to change the law. It's actually, we don't care now if it's in the flight restriction zone, even if the airport is shut, and so many are shut now, you can't fly. You've got to get permission. And you try reaching some of these places at times. You can send an email, if they don't answer it. You can try phoning, you don't answer it. You're just kippered.
Why are you guys concerned with that? If you have the same rules as we have here, so everybody is house confined. So drone flights are also forbidden.
No, I'm key worker. I can go out and work.
You can go out work. You fool the guys. You fool the government. So you have to pay to use the airspace. Don't worry.
Yeah. No,
I'm very lucky. I get to go out and fly. I am very, very lucky. I'm still, I'm just gently doing the jobs that need doing. I'm very lucky.
So you're considered essential services.
Yes.
So
No.
great for you. But the thing is, even when the system is open, if you have managed to get an essential services, you should easily get permission to fly whenever and wherever you want to.
Not if you can't reach them. That's the point. If they are shut, there's no one there. You cannot reach them. You can send an email, but you cannot reach them. But if the airport was shut, the old rules would have allowed me within 1 kilometre of the boundary, and I would have been all right. But now, because of the new rule, it's absolutely anywhere inside that flight restriction zone and runway protection zones. I just cannot do it. And you used to choose to do a job when the airport was shut because you didn't have to ring anyone. It was safe to do. You just go and do it. But they changed it and they went, even if it's shut, you've got to go and get permission.
Even with your DJI drones?
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay.
What's up, 250?
Good luck unlocking the areas with DJI.
Oh, do you know what? Yeah. Well, to be honest, unlocking a drone, I mean, there's a lot of people doing it. I saw there was a lot of people unlocking their minis. So they're just ticking the 3 boxes, getting their phone code, and they were on the mini forums. What they're doing, just unlocking, going and flying, because they thought that gave them permission from like ATC or told ATC they could fly. There's quite a few scary posts on Facebook in the mini groups, and I'm going, no, that's not how it works. Don't trust the DJIs.
It's the same here. The mini DJIs have come to create a new set of problems to people that want to fly within the laws, because it's a crowd that really couldn't care less, doesn't have interest to know. If the drone asks to fly in an area, you just press done, and up you go.
Yeah. It is an amazing issue. But what also I found astounding in the mini groups, the amount of people that have crashed their mini is astounding. I've never seen. Yeah, what was I expecting? I don't know. But it's astounding how many. I mean, I was reading through the group one day, and I must have counted 10 to 20 people that had lost their drones for one reason or another, from hitting trees, wires, icing on props, them not understanding it for flying moist, cold, freezing weather. The aircraft loses its lift as the ice forms on its props. It was astounding. I was just like, no. But no one's died on the upshot.
No, but then they just go out and hire the DJI care service, and they get to fly again. So
interestingly, there's a few little problems, because at the minute, DJI refresh, so you send your drone off, the problem is it's leaving the United Kingdom. So at the minute, there's a bit of a problem. As it leaves the United Kingdom, you've got to make sure that it's going back for service warranty. So any courier you send it through, you have to make sure it's going for repair, warranty repair. It is coming back, kind of thing. Because as it goes out, it's gone to the EU now, into their network. As it gets fixed, when it comes back, oh dear, tax. And people are getting hit with this tax. So they've already paid tax for it. They're not importing it back again. It's not importing a new machine or anything, but it gets hit by tax on the way back. There's quite a few people getting hit by that at the minute as well.
I don't know them, because DJI normally pay the shipping themselves. So how are they getting hit for them? It'll be on the value. Yeah, there's a lot of teething. Funny enough, I had 2 items sent to me in the last 2 weeks to look at, and it cost me, let's just say that, to even bring them into the UK. There is nothing coming for free.
So much this is what happens here all the time, every day. It's exactly how it works when you're an independent nation. Anyway,
Oh, come on.
what are you paying for things? Lordy.
I have a notice from UK circuit board that is coming from UK that it was shipped 18 days ago. So it's almost, for me, UK is almost the same as China, because it's taking as long as it's coming from China now.
It's interesting. We're starting to see a lot of comments this week. RC gear is going up in the US, especially. People are starting to complain about that, thinking it's, as a result of the manufacturers, and it isn't. It's the tariffs that have ended in the US. Flight controllers have gone up 10 to 20%. It's going to hit close to all RC components in the US simply because of the tariff changes. We're then seeing a slight increase in the UK because of the changes that the companies have to make to shipping, and they're just the reality is they're just going to charge us. It's not the shipping, it's the paperwork element that they now have to do. And anything over, I think, 150 or 60 pounds, you're going to start seeing real trouble with, because they've got to collect the VAT. And that's where the other problem starts kicking in. You're probably going to see drone and Model RC related products go up by 10 to 30% across the board in the next 12 months.
I suggest you order it from Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And make use of the Northern Ireland protocol.
Yeah, I'm surprised. It'll go back, Richard, like the old days. Like I used to be into amateur radio a lot, and there was a number of amateur radio shops based in Ireland for this very reason. That stuff used to come through the back doors that way, and you'll start seeing that stuff again. It's all like who was the company that used to sell CDs on Jersey or Guernsey?
That's right. I remember years ago.
Do you remember them? Yeah, years and years ago. There were companies who used to pop up all over, and it was like a CD back then would be 13 quid in the UK, and you could get it from them for like 8 quid. Yeah. And it was only took a day later. So, but there is a lot of whisperings around the internet of people starting to see, as I said, flight controllers in the US, especially. The people are paying $8 to $10 more.
I believe that from US to UK now the US company has to be VAT registered, so they can charge you VAT.
It depends on value.
Yeah. 150, I think it's 150, 160 pounds. But is it changed because nothing's particularly new in the US with the legislation? But obviously the EU, I had an item that comes from Germany. Normally that would have been 2 days straight through the door, job done. Thank you very much. 80 quid bill later, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, okay, thanks for that. But yeah, we're going to see. The interesting thing with this will be whether we see the price increase on RTF models, and that's across the board. No one will escape this. Skydio, Autel, they'll all suffer the same issues here. And we've already seen some companies stop shipping and restart. For instance, Prusa, who make my 3D printer, they stopped shipping to the UK entirely up until this week, until they could fully understand how the new regulations were going to affect them. It's really the reality is of Brexit and the global issues we find ourselves in. We're going to be paying more for stuff, and we're in a situation where you cannot buy right now what you want. Silicon shortages have hit the graphics card industry. It's now hit the automotive industry, and companies are already saying they're going to prioritize supply for automotive because it falls under transport, and governments get involved and it all gets nasty. And the next fall on from that is things like the SoCs that we see in flight controllers and drones. So there's a very real possibility for the next 12 to 18 months things are not going to be quite what we've used to with buying products, and anything new that comes out is going to be highly limited.
I need to set up a BVLOS point across to Europe, mainland Europe, so I can fly up my coastline, get my VTOL to fly out. Someone put some stuff in it. I'll send it back.
I believe traditionally that was done with sort of wooden ships, and and you had to live in Cornwall, and you had to have barrels of rum and stuff. That's how that works, isn't it?
Gary's laughing. You see, Gary's sitting here thinking, price increases? I've always paid through the nose for things, so stop worrying about it. You know?
It's exactly right. 2 weeks for something to arrive, try 6 or 7 months. So, it's like, come on.
What is interesting is the US element, because obviously when you've looked at global pricing of UAS and drones, we've always been about 20% more than the US as a result of VAT. Many states in the US have been less. Okay, some have taxes, some don't. But the US are starting to go, hold on a minute. Why are we, why am I suddenly paying for this? Because, let's be honest, America has always been cheaper for everything. People go on holiday there, they bring back cameras, they bring back tech. Unofficially, there's a reason, but I think it's going to be a very interesting year, especially with the lack of supply on silicone. And the car industry one is really going to have an impact, because no one, you had Ford, Audi, VW all shutting production down because they ran out of components, and that, let's take VW and Audi, they're pretty much owned by the state, or a certain part of the state in Germany, or at least it's not state, but it sort of is. And so you're going to see some interesting results. Just don't try to buy a computer component, for God's sake.
So could you imagine if Tesla were now building in Germany, if their gigafactory was running, because they won't slow down for lack of components. They make everything in-house.
Yeah.
Well, it's the silicon, but even, look, if you take funny enough, I talked to Gary about this earlier. If you take Autopilot, which Tesla have, yes, it's all their own, but they're still using TSMC to make the silicone, which they have made it for them. So, and the problem is now there's a lack of wafer, there's a lack of substrate, which is everything it goes on to. So there's a huge global shortage right now around making ICs.
Yeah, you know what will happen if he has any hint of a shortage? You know what Elon Musk will do, don't you? He'll just build back to do it. He'll just
well, there's only one there's only like 3 foundries on silicon.
He'll just build his own, though. He will
the car industry is the problem with the car industry is they stepped out of rotation. So the car industry had the choice to buy the stuff in about August last year, and because the world was on its bottom, they went, "Now we'll let this rotation go past." And now suddenly there's been a mass surgence, and they suddenly want their spot back in the queue that they didn't take.
Oh, interesting stuff. What an interesting world we're all living in at the moment.
It's very different.
Well, our COVID vaccines arrived first lot arrived yesterday here in South Africa. They'll be starting to distribute them next month, and only
Are they
a million.
from Russia?
No, they're not. They're talking about those though, but they're not. No, they're from India and the Oxford Zeneca, is it? They're made in India anyway. And and the other big news here today is we can drink beer again. We are allowed to have alcohol again. It has been made unillegal.
It is freer in your country than it is mine.
But why is it that you're not slurring then?
Funny enough, I considered. I will admit to having had 2 beers, and I was considering having a third live on air, but I feel I would be asleep in front of you right now were that to have occurred.
It's going to be interesting to see how this new world, everyone's sitting here talking about when's the next Mavic 3 and when the next. I think it's going to be a very dry few months, even whole 12 months. I will be shocked if we see anything major come along. One product, but
FPV.
You got the FPV one, haven't we?
That's the one product. I'm not going to say any more than that, but there's one product, but even that, I think could even see scale back. Root whispers are that time of year, but no one knows. Anything is in the air right now. Anything is in the air right now.
Can I tell you? Just close the shot on your camera, because we can see the box of it.
I wish I can say 100% certainty I will not be involved in this launch.
And the version 2 goggles make a little guest appearance on their website this week?
Yeah, basically, my understanding on that is you will see them in the next month across the globe. It's just logistics. It's just everything. US, I think, is around the next week or two, and then I would expect Europe by about end of February, March time. I don't. It was a strange. It's not a launch. The launch isn't the right word. No, okay, I'll be blunt. It was a bloody mess. Whatever it was a bloody mess, and it was handled very badly. However, the product does exist. It will be out shortly. In what sort of numbers, though? Again, they could be suffering the same issues everyone else is right now, and that might be the very reason we saw this problem. US has some stock. Yeah, it's limited though. You know, I would not expect lots of stock on this for quite some time.
And we will have the usual constraints of the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in it now, aren't we? I think.
Literally.
Yeah.
So anything that needed, you know, and something that a lot of people don't, and I didn't understand for a long time is, and it's a strange concept for us in the West, that people go on holiday and don't come back. But this is quite a big thing in China, that people work for a company for 12 months, they'll go back home and they won't return. There's a fair portion of staff that never go back to those companies. So it takes about 2 months plus for them to really get back up and running fully again. It depends how many decide to move back onto different pastures new.
Gosh, that is different.
It's very different. It was quite surprising when I was reading about it. I was reading a good article on it on one of the tech websites, and they were saying it can be up to 30% of staff, depending on the company, don't return from Chinese New Year.
Who knew?
It's very different to us, isn't it, over here?
Well, no, you're staying at home. But we're back to school.
And to be fair, I don't like to use this word low end. That's not the right term. It's the frontline staff. So your factory operatives, your people on the production line. You know, management are slightly different, but it's the people who are doing the labor intensive tasks on the front line. There's such a shortage of labor over there. People can just go, I'm not going there, I'm going to go somewhere else, so I'm going to stay home for a bit.
Amazeballs. All right, gents, so we are talking about Chinese working conditions, so that probably is a bit of a clue, isn't it? Has there been any other stories that have caught our eye this week before we depart?
There's one around Tesla, which is Hyundai, not Tesla, sorry, Apple and Hyundai. Now, the reason it's singing because Hyundai is spending a lot of money in the drone industry right now.
They are.
They're spending a lot of money in every industry right now.
Well. And hasn't Apple got a lot of patents in the drone world as well that they've never used?
Apple have a lot of patents in everything. You got Hyundai, who own Boston Dynamics now, who have also put a lot of money into various drone companies and are now looking to be involved with Apple and making believed not just electric cars, because this isn't about electric cars, this is about self-driving electric vehicles.
Mobility platforms. That's the name.
Mobility platforms. Exactly. And they're big in this Coventry test trial area, the vertiport next to the football stadium or whatever it is there. And I haven't quite twigged why, but Hyundai are not really being reported by the normal advocates of advanced air mobility or UAM. They're not really jumping up and down and spouting about them. And I don't know why. Because to me, Hyundai are I think I might know why. I'll say in a second. But to me, they're the most exciting, one of the most exciting entrants in that space. And I think the reason they're not being loved is because they've pinned a tail on the donkey of just mucking about in 2028, and that doesn't fit with the VC funding that other people are wanting to hear about. They want to hear about last year and they want it now, whatever. And that's why I find Hyundai more intriguing, because they're always saying, well, we'll muck about in 2028 a bit. It's like, oh yeah, that's a bit more a realistic time scale, you know.
I saw the South Koreans enter the home electronics industry. You know, Hyundai South Koreans, they don't mess around. When those companies take Samsung, LG. These are all South Korean companies that have huge amounts of money behind them. When they get involved in something, there's no messing around. They tend to walk in and then in a period of time dominate an industry. You know, if you just look at TVs, Sony and Panasonic were the best. And Pioneer, you know, who remembers Pioneer? You know, these were companies that dominated. Now you walk into any electronics retailer, it's Samsung and LG. You'll find the odd Panasonic and the odd Sony, but it's Samsung and LG. And if they decide to get involved in the drone industry and with Boston Dynamics under their belt, you know, there's a huge amount of capabilities.
Yeah, I think that's a real strategic move with Boston Dynamics. It really is.
Yeah. You know, who was the company who advertised a drone with a gripper? Do you remember that? About a year or two, it had two arms hanging off the bottom of it.
Yeah.
The reality is, Hyundai are now the company who could make that.
It was a Japanese company called Prodrone.
Yeah, that was it. It had two.
Yeah, you could grab a chair and land on the chair by grabbing on the chair. Yeah,
it was scary enough at the time when I saw it. You know.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, just going back to the automated cars, if you go back to the automated cars and Tesla, apparently Tesla's actual beta self-driving, which isn't to the public yet, they've got their own machine, on their own cars, of course. Go and look for a guy called Munro Live, it's the Munro channel. He does teardowns of vehicles. He actually he was taken out in this Tesla with self-driving, and he was sat in the passenger seat, and he said the car, everyone has said this is not possible. The car would do a left-hand automated turn, okay, in America, so on the wrong side of the road and everything, it could do left-handed turns that never touched anything. So the driver sat there, and he's the passenger. And this guy, Monroe, he is really good at stripping stuff down, explaining how the cars have been built, all the faults with them. But they took him out in this Tesla with this new self-driving it. He says, there is no one. And he knows the car industry. He says, there's no one, not even close to where Tesla is. Everyone else is so far behind them that if they push this out today, this update they have, they could probably save more lives than having airbags in cars. The system is that good. But at the minute, Tesla just sat holding on to it, making sure it's right, because Elon has said it's 99.9%. But what about that one? They've just got to get a little bit and they'll be happy. But apparently, the self-driving in the Tesla is now that they don't release is something else. And it'll even do right-handed turns.
Is regulatory approval, and that's the big problem he's facing at the moment is and I know there's quite a good talk about this, is at what percentage better than safer than a human must AI be to be acceptable? You know, at the moment we accept that human level is at a certain point. So how much safer than a human does autopilot have to be allowable by the regulators? And that's where there's a lot of hoo-ha, and the talk is about 200% at the moment, but no one really knows where those cars will lie.
Well, surely, right, and this is what the kind of bugbear is. The system can already see. So they were talking about if something just appears on the road, say a UFO just lands right in the middle of the road, the car has to know, I must avoid that, but if there's pedestrians there, I have to avoid that, and I've got to avoid the oncoming traffic. The car has to do everything it can never to hit anything. It has
trolley problem, the famous trolley problem. But they reckon that another way of looking at this, though, is let's say half the number, about 1 million people die as a result of vehicle accidents a year around the world. Let's say it was to half that. Would it really matter to you? Christopher makes a very good point there on Facebook. That'll probably do more than anything else. Actually, forget autonomy. Do that, and that'll have better. No, Louis says not.
No, just remove the humans from the roads. It's the same as manned. It's the same issue that we have with manned air flights.
It's a combination of infrastructure updates. Get rid of the people.
Yeah. So we want to fly our drones in whenever and wherever we want. Just stop the manned air flights. It's the same issue.
And this is the problem. And one of the big problems that it faces is computer to computer would be 100% fine. You know, if we could remove all people and put everyone on autopilot tomorrow, it would solve the problems. And the problem you got is what AI can't currently do is look at that grass verge and calculate in its head, it would be safe to go up that grass verge rather than hit that. And this is where AI still has a problem. Now, Jim Keller, for those who don't know who Jim Keller is, he's the man that designed the autopilot SoC and is largely responsible for the current computer industry that we have, or at least the chips that we have today. Sort of sees it as simply a processing, more data, more cameras, more info, just like on autopilot. We're adding more and more sensors. The more data you put in, the more accurate your outcome will be. Whereas the AI, the people who are studying AI believe that we have to get this level of, it's not consciousness, but it's a level of, take that grass verge. You imagine you're driving down the road and there's a grass verge that's a foot high. You know you could drive on that grass verge and probably not kill yourself. So if you had a choice of hitting a child, another vehicle, a wall, or going up that grass verge, your natural instinct would be to go for the grass verge. And this is where AI isn't able to step in and make those decisions. So there are many accidents that happen.
Are you sure of that, Ian?
Well, it's understand. And some people would still call it a data problem. Some people would argue it is still a data problem.
But the legal question is, who's driving?
And yes.
Who's responsible? That's the legal question, isn't it? Because is it the car or the algorithm that drives the car? Is it the person that designed the algorithm. Or is it actually the driver? And that's going to be something that the game will have to wrestle with, I think, and that will have to be determined because it's all about liability.
Well, I meant to talk to you about this actually, Richard. I think we've got to start thinking about getting flight stacks actually sort of checked out as a pilot, as it were. Because if you think about the flight stack or just the software, forget the hardware part of it, just the software doing the driving of your drone.
Yeah.
It's actually the experience of many, many people, and it may have flown many, many, many hours. I think Trish said last week that that it's believed that RG Pilot's flying in 700,000 platforms at the moment, at least 700,000 platforms. So one could argue that the flight stack has got 700,000 minutes. Let's just say they've only flown for a minute, 700,000 minutes of experience, or 7 million minutes of experience. So
that experience is not collected and used. That's the problem.
But we have, I hear that. But then we need to start doing that, and we need to start doing that in a way that the regulator will accept. Oh yeah, the flight stack that we shall call Dave is equivalent to a 5,000-hour pilot or whatever, and it will actually be greater than that. And that's another.
You already have that, Gary. You already have that.
But regulators don't know.
It's called DJI that is always calling home.
Yeah, yes, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, I get you, but regulating, but we need to start viewing the way or seeing the way we view the flight stack differently. It is a pilot, it is an experienced pilot, or it is a sum of lots of work. There needs to be lots of different thinking, and unfortunately, the stuff that Richard's come on to speak about and other things going on is so yesterday's thinking. It's
Consider the following: if someone is nearer or more close to full autonomy, that is Tesla, period. And has any one of you seen any kind of movement from Musk or any Tesla-related company to go to drones?
No, true. Yeah, that's a good question, a fair point. But there's no doubt that drones are easier to make autonomous, or am I wrong? Surely they're easier.
No, come on. You still have highways in the sky. You still have you don't have pedestrians. You don't have a lot of things. But you have gravity to consider. So that's an important point. So autonomy, if Tesla or whatever, whoever cracks that nut, can do it on the roads, I believe it is just a very short step to make it go up. And then all the liability issues that Richard was mentioning will also transfer from the 2D, let's call it 2D world of the road world to the air world. So who will be liable for a bad decision of an autopilot for the smarts or for the actions he took? So
does the law... Sorry.
We are speaking today of a drone that crashed on a plane or an helicopter, which is not heard of. But if it will be a fully autonomous system, how will we handle, or how will the law handle the liability issues?
I think it's simple, Louis. You've got to have a pilot in command, and that has not changed. So even if you've got autonomy, and we're seeing it with some of the massive drones now that do have great degrees of autonomy, there's still somebody there sat in a chair with a joystick and is able to press a button. And I think
that's not autonomy.
Come on, those are
not quite autonomy, but I think that somebody is going to have some degree of oversight until regulators are have gone over that hurdle of either equivalency or more, to your point earlier, Gary. And it's got to be somewhere where they're comfortable in going. And what we're constantly seeing is there's this constant creep back to manned aviation principles, which aren't always applicable, because that's what they know and that's what they're comfortable with. What we need is some bold decisions to be made in terms of where we're going. And when autonomy gets to a certain point in other industries like cars or something like that, just in cars or something like that, then that will also be some degree of equivalency that can be brought in terms of educating and improving understanding around what those risks are and what those liabilities are. And I think it's going to be a cumulative effort across a number of industries, of which I think drones can play a leading part in.
Yeah, it's a road I didn't expect us to go down. Sorry, go on, Mark.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the automating with cars, so you still have to have the driver sat there, have someone in the driver's seat, but it can record what's going on. It records the log. It's not like a normal car where, I get in it, I turn out a junction, I don't see a car get smashed. You have to remember that Tesla and all them, they see that other car. They record that for the insurers. That's the interesting bit.
Yeah. The other thing I've done while you've been talking is I brought up the piece on the broker system for information that EASA are going to put in place. If you don't mind, I just want to read this to you to get your immediate reaction, because I think if you're aligned with me, you'll see where this is going. And it says here, the system, which is a broker system based on open web technologies and secured standards, which facilitates the transfer of drones information between the member states through the agency acting as a hub. In parallel, it will act as a test case for a larger project to create a fully centralized database of information at EASA, providing the basis for more effective cooperation between EASA and its member states on certification, oversight, enforcement, as required by Article 74 of the Basic Regulation. The database, due to be launched in increments in mid-2022, because at the moment this is a temporary broker solution, to the end of 2024, will act as a repository for certificates, approvals, licenses, declarations, and transfers of responsibilities, in addition to drone registration data. And that is what they're going to do. So you've got a complete database there on what everybody's doing, where they're going, how they're doing it, and when they're doing it. Literally that. And this is everything.
And the thing is, to whom they are going to sell that information. Who is going to profit from that information?
And
Who
in
would
the UK,
be?
and in the UK, you watch the Demara system become exactly the same thing for the UK. You watch, it'll become somewhere where you will put what you're certified to fly. You'll have your operator ID, you'll have your flyer ID in the Demaras, you'll have a login, you'll have your operator ID, your flyer ID, you'll have your A2 CSD if you've got it, you'll have your Article 16 if you've got it, your A3 if you've got it. All your stuff is going to sit in there, and it'll probably eventually log all your flights, scarily.
Can
That
we
means
argue
the regulator in Latvia, for example, can have the information on all of what's going on in France, for example.
but could one? Yes, the difference with this really is the fact it's EU wide. That has its own set of implications, doesn't it? Really.
Yes.
But could one argue that you sort of have the system anyway in the form of the Civil Aviation Authority in England? They've got all your records, but they're not all in. It's that one placeness bit. Eggs in one basket, as Dragon Eye says. It's the one placeness of it all that seems to be a little bit unusual.
Just taking that point, Gary, if we take the word enforcement out of that, what does that mean? Where does the information in relation to enforcement go? Is it going direct to police authorities in all member states at one time? Is it going to the CAA at the same, or the regulator at the same time? Is it going to a separate body that wants to know what you're doing? Could it be for deconfliction, for example? I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there because this is incredibly new, and the fact that they're saying it's going to be a test case for a larger project, where we don't know what the full parameters are yet of the broker system, which is a temporary one, is a bit concerning.
Big Brother is watching you, literally.
And monetization, that isn't just a question of, Louis, how they're going to sell it. Is that monetization for operating in the air?
And it's, well,
UTM.
that is going to be a hoon of an expensive system, isn't it? There's no doubt about that.
We know what that costs for an Excel spreadsheet.
How many years is it going to take to roll it out? It's going to take years and years.
2022 to the end of 24 are the dates they've put on it.
Yeah, but will they really do it in that time frame? How much slip is there going to be on that?
It's a matter of how much money they can throw at that problem. They throw the money at the problem, even if it's not fully backed up, they'll enforce it. Even if it's not fully compliant with everything. But they'll start doing it. Look at what's happening now with the registrations in Europe. Almost any country is fully compliant now. So,
well, one wonders if they won't, because I mean, if you go to all this trouble, you might as well pull in all the manned flights as well. You might as well pull everything in there if you're going to have one sky. Why would you keep the manned stuff segregated from all this? It'll be trivial. In 5 years' time, there'll be blow all airplanes flying anyway. As we know.
Richard was on the chapter of drones. Who knows what they're doing on the chapter of manned aviation?
I do nothing.
No, I'm sure they have work groups or whatever that is concocting some kind of crazy scheme to integrate on that.
It'll all boil down eventually to electronic conspicuousy. So forget remote ID, it'll all turn into electronic conspicuousy, and we'll all be flying, and we'll all be able to see where everyone else is, and then they'll just fine you if you go in the wrong airspace without permission. They'll be able to do that, and it won't matter if it's manned or unmanned. They're going to just come and get us, and they're going to send you a fine in the post because they have information. You're just going to get
automatically, And
if you go beyond visual line of sight, right? They go, oh, you flew a kilometre, so therefore we're going to send you a fine. You're going to get it in the post. But visual line of sight depends on what aircraft you're flying, and that's going to be a big problem for them as well. Because if I'm flying the Believer, I can see a Believer out about 1 kilometre and a bit. because it's so big. You can see where it is in the sky. You can monitor it.
500 meters, isn't
Won't
it?
it be by that time that they'll be CE marked and they'll have, the electronic conspicuity that Mark's talking about in order to be able to track and trace your drone? And then what's interesting, I mean, we talked a little bit about enforcement. You can quite easily conceive that this also includes approvals and licenses. So it could be the 3 strikes and you're out rule, couldn't it? You get three strikes, 3 fines. That's it. We're taking your license away. You're no longer flying until we sort it out.
Oh, the car 12 points. So you get points depending what you're doing. And when you hit 12 points, you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
That seems like a huge project that seems to be lacking in vision, really, if it's just unmanned stuff.
On IT terms, it's quite easy. Just a database and some remote access to the database.
An Excel spreadsheet for £16 million.
Yes, Raspberry Pi 4, probably a Raspberry Pi 5 by then, I reckon, something like that.
No, I believe now they'll do it with the Nano.
Yes. No, we're definitely going off. It's at 1:35. Yeah, we've been here a while. Any more before we go? Going once, going twice. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Richard, thank you for taking the time to speak to us about it. Unpack the UK stuff and horrify us with this new database. How lovely. Something to lose sleep about now. And wherever you are in the world, dear viewer, be very safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, stay away from people. As I say in the daily thing, we're all drone nerds. Nobody wants to speak to us anyway, so that's okay. But just be careful wherever you are. Look after yourselves, be safe. We'll see you again same time next week, 2100 GMT. And pop in at lunchtime when we do the odd little chat, the odd little bit of news. Got to make that more professional. Anyway, for now, take care. Bye-bye. Cheerio. 2 buttons to press.